Savior, if you know him. Amen, amen. That's good. Well, it's time now for the preaching of the Word of God. Brother Tom Gilliam is going to come up here and preach to us this morning. And whatever the good Lord's laid on his heart, I have never, ever talked to a preacher before he gets up in this pulpit about anything going on in the church, about any issue or any doctrine or anything. I marvel at the times, though, I've watched the preachers get up here, and the message they give them comes directly from God. Amen, brother. Now this right here, I want to get it up under you, because that thing will pop. There you go.
Listen, Lord, amen.
It's on. Let's see. I don't think it is.
Thank you, sir. If you have a Bible this morning, you'll find our text in the book of Colossians. Book of Colossians. I won't ask you to stand unless you want to stand the whole time. I'm going to read a little bit and preach a little bit. So you can be seated. I appreciate you. I'm not going to read a text. I'm just going to preach a little bit to you out of Colossians. I've been meditating in this book since, I don't know, early January. And I have been fascinated about a lot of things in this book. It's written to a little house church in Colossae. Probably enough people that you could put in your living room, just a small group of people. And I was reading one of the old writers. He called this the Jesus book. The Jesus book. I don't know which one of the old writers it was. Don't ask me. I heard a preacher not long ago, somebody asked him, who do you like to read after? He said he didn't read after nobody but dead people. He said that was the only people that was saying anything. So one of those dead people called this the Jesus book. And so I began to wonder, why in this world would he call this the Jesus book? Is it any more a Jesus book than any of the other books in the Bible? And I began to take note. In chapter 1, Paul mentions Jesus 32 times. In chapter 2, he mentions him 20 times. Chapter 3, he mentions him 18 times. And in chapter 4, he mentions him 4 times. You'd almost think Paul was eat up with Jesus. Mentioned him 74 times in this little book to this little house church. Why, gracious, there's only 95 verses in the entire book. You could probably read it this afternoon in 15 minutes and not raise a sweat. Paul mentioned Jesus almost every verse in this little book, the book of Colossians. As I begin to meditate upon this book in January and formative months afterwards, God's been teaching me a life lesson. And I speak of a life lesson, it would be a lesson that would take you all your life to learn. Don't think you get fuzzy-wuzzy this morning, make you a little trip to this altar and nail this lesson down. You won't. Every time I think I've made some progress this year in this lesson, I realize that maybe I haven't even started kindergarten in this lesson. Here is the lesson taught me in this book. That absolutely nothing in this life is about me. Absolutely nothing in this life is about you. But everything is about him. And I know you say amen, glory to God, I believe that. My problem is living that. Without telling somebody that I am a King James pre-trib Baptist from Knoxville, Temple Baptist, just by my attitude, just by the way I conduct myself, am I projecting to the world that nothing is about me. Everything is about him. If I was to ask your grandchildren this morning, when you go over there to Baw's house, does it seem like everything's about Jesus, or is it about him? It's what we're projecting. Paul uses as the center of the hub of this book, chapter number 2 and verse 9, he says, for in him, that's another one of those mentions of Jesus. For in him dwelleth all, I did not know if you'd see that word, and I thought it underlined. All the fullness of the Godhead bodily. All of God, all of his attributes, all of his powers, all of his characteristics dwells fully in Jesus Christ. You say, what's the big deal about that? What's the big deal? If I'm going to project to the world, if my fellow Baptist friends here at the church is going to see in me my attitude, my reaction to sufferings, that nothing's about me, it's about him. Amen. This is a big deal. How come? Look in chapter 1, verse 27. He says, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is, time out, hold on. What are those next 3 words? Christ, all of the fullness of the Godhead bodily, moved inside of me. That'll stop you from sucking your thumb if you get a hold of that. The very creator of the universe, if you're saved this morning, has decided to house himself inside of you. This is awful deep. I don't know if you can get this or not. It may be over your head. That makes me think, there ain't nothing about me. It's all about him. Now, in this book, and I don't have time to deal with all 5. I'm just going to deal with 2, one this morning, one tonight. 5 different relationships Paul says you're going to have with this one that dwells inside of you. If the world is going to be able to say that nothing's about you, it's all about you. I wished I had the time in chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. Paul says you must know him as the personal Christ. The personal Christ. But I feel like the Lord has assigned me this morning to begin in verse 15. And I want us to look this morning. If, it's a big if. Because I'm going to tell you something. Just about time I think I got this learned, somebody will cross me. Of course, I know some of you, you never get upset when somebody crosses you. I'll let them think it's about me when it's never been about me. Never has it been. And it ain't never been about you. It's all about him. If I'm going to be able to project that, I must know him today as the powerful Christ. I was wondering, have you ever given any thought as to how powerful this person is that claims to have moved inside of you? Wow, that's pretty potent. Why in this world would I come over here on Wednesday night and whine about some kind of problem I'm having if I've got somebody that powerful living inside of me? You listening to me? I notice in chapter 1 and verse number 15, the powerful person
of Christ. Paul would mention the image of his person. He says, who? There's that mention of Christ again. 74 times Paul mentions him in this book. He says, who is the image of the invisible God? I was interested in that little word, image. Literally, the little word means God in focus. Wow, this may be beyond your thoughts. Did you know ain't nobody ever seen God?
That's right.
How come? He's a spirit.
Right.
But suppose they would sell us a spiritual telescope today. And I want to fine tune it now. I want to get a glimpse of God. I focused it in. Hey, I've got God in the telescope. What's it look like? Looks like Jesus Christ. God in focus. I love that, don't you? The image of the invisible. Do you know when he lived here upon the earth, you couldn't tell where God began or man ended. You couldn't tell the difference. I see him laying up there on a pillow. Just a weak, helpless man while the storm's going on. Well, gracious, ain't nothing God about that. He's asleep. Till he stands up on the bow of that ship and tells that storm, shh. Gracious, he's a very God. Huh? I see him down there at the tomb. Why, gracious, he crying like a baby over one day his friends died. Why, he ain't nothing but a weakling old man crying over there, whimpering around. Until he tells them, you mind moving that stone a little bit? Lazarus, come forth. I'm telling you, the one living inside of me, you can't tell where God begins and man ends. He is all God and he's all man. It's not about me. It is about him this morning. I'm asking you, is that what I'm projecting to the world? I wonder this morning if you would ask your mate, do you project at the house? Ain't nothing about you. It's all about him. Is that what we're projecting? Oh, I'm talking about the image of his person. I see also the implications of his person. Paul says in verse 15, he's the firstborn of every creature. Gracious, I got problems with that on its face value. Jesus certainly was not the first baby ever born. Paul said he was the firstborn of all creatures. How in this world can that be? That word firstborn must be something more than what we think. That little word firstborn means a birth of superiority. The only one of its kind. Do you know, this may blow your mind, did you know he's the only baby ever born that him and his daddy were the same age when he was born? Well, that's going to mess your mind up real big. Huh? Do you realize that he's the only baby that was ever born that messed up the 8th grade science books? 8th grade science book says the only way you can have a baby is that an egg and a seed must come together. Here's a baby born, no egg, no seed, yet we got a baby. I love the hound out of that, don't you? That's the one that lives inside of me. They have phylums now. They have plant phylum. They have human phylums. I got to thinking, did you know this year is the first time that Jesus did not make it in the top 10 of the most influential people of the world? And I am so glad that he did not make it this year. How come? If he'd have made it, they'd have had to have another list. We got plant matter, we got human matter, and we got Jesus matter. He's the only person in this file. There's none above him. There's none below him. There's none like him. He decided to come and get inside of me. Nothing could ever be about me. It must be all about him. Powerful person of Christ. Could I go further? You ain't left yet, have you? Stay a little while. Notice the powerful practice of Christ. I notice in verse 16, the practice of what? Creation. Preacher, are you trying to tell me this morning that you're crazy enough to think that the creator of the whole universe is living inside of you? I believe with all my heart. Huh? I see you waving your hands and shouting. Are you acting like it? I'm telling you, does the Walmart gal, when she crosses you and messes up your order down there, does she see that it's all about God and not about you? That waitress that don't bring the stuff to your table like you want it brought, does she see it ain't about you? It's all about him. Are you listening to me this morning? Practice of creation. He says in verse 16, for by him were all things created, in heaven, in earth, visible, invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or power, all things were created by him and for him. I love that. All those powers, all those dominions. I thank the Lord this morning that I'm confident that God put Obama in as president. Boy, that sucked the air out of the room, didn't it? You don't believe God put Obama in as president? He says he's in charge of all dominions, all powers, and all principles. You say, preacher, how come you're so sure that he did? I travel across this country. I'm going home tomorrow. Been on a 30-day trip. I'm in over 50 Baptist churches a year, and I ain't never met anybody that voted for him. So the only thing I can figure, God must have put him in there. Ain't nobody voted for him. And some of you that are looking at the ground are telling me something. Huh? It's the very creator of the whole universe. It's come, got inside of me. Reminded of the old British preacher, John Phillips. Had the privilege of hearing him twice preaching in person. John Phillips was in his home country. He's preaching a series of messages on the stars. He was preaching on the Orion constellation. He went down to the local planetarium, requested of the planetarium leader there if he could get a black and white photo of the constellation of Orion. He said that would be no problem at all. Few moments, he brought it back to him. He handed it to Dr. Phillips. He said, there'll be no charge. He said, you know, we don't own it. John Phillips said that the proprietor at the planetarium changed the subject when he made this next statement. He said, would you like me to introduce you to him? He said, I know him personally. By the way, He's living inside of me. Wow, the one that hung the stars in space, the twinkles in space, living inside of me. Am I projecting to the world that it's about him? It's not about me. Talking about the practice of creation. I see also in our text, verse 17, the practice of consistency. He says, and he is before all things. By him, all things consist. Wow. One living inside of me. By him, all things. What? Consist. That's our little word for held together. Did you know since 2013, you and I as taxpayers have been paying $600 million a year for a think group to study the atom and what is holding this together. We are still paying that $600 million. They are still studying. Although they have made a decision, they have decided that what is holding this together is gluon. Wow. Man, you hear that word, you'll have an Oprah moment. Wow. Gluon is the Latin word for mysterious substance. Wow. I'm here to tell you this morning, I do not know what is holding this together, but I do know who it is living inside of me. Wow. Did you know Peter said one day, we'll see the earth melt and the heavens shall be on fire. I had preachers tell me before they thought that's a nuclear explosion. I don't believe a word of it. What do you think it is, preacher? I think it's when he steps out of here. He'll look back and the whole thing will blow. Hey, tell them Jehovah's Witnesses are going to inherit the earth. Tell them better hold on, she's fixing to blow. Preacher, how you getting out of here? When he leaves out of here, I'm leaving with him. How come? He's living inside of me. You listening to me this morning? I'm talking about projecting to the world that nothing, absolutely nothing. You say, preacher, you don't know what I'm going through this morning. We're going through some of the roughest times we've ever been in our life. I got news for you, honey. I don't care what you're going through. It ain't about you. It's all about him. Oh, I love that, don't you? Talking about the powerful practice of Christ. Could I mention this? The powerful principle of Christ. You've got the Bible there. Chapter 1, verse 18. The powerful principle of demonstration. Preacher, how can I demonstrate to the world without speaking to them, without sticking a gospel tract under their nose? And I'm not against any of those. I got gospel tracts in my pocket. Mom and Daddy taught me from a young boy. My mom and Dad spent the last 20 years they had in this earth. And they sat on a bench in Gatlinburg behind the coffee shop, behind the pancake house in Gatlinburg. And they sat on that bench 8 hours a day. And whoever sat down on that bench, they told them about Jesus. That's what they did. They just loved to do it. So they instilled that in me. But I'm talking about without opening your mouth. How can you project to the world? Nothing is about you. See it in your attitude. See it in your disposition. See how you act. Powerful principle of demonstration. How can I do it? Look at verse 18. He is the head of the body of the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have. You ever see words in the Bible you wish you could cut them out and throw them away? This word right here is a row word. This word right here gives you no wiggle room. He says he will settle for nothing but the preeminence. There is some of you here priding yourself that you have given God place in your life. Matter of fact, some years ago, we had a renowned preacher here in this country, and he developed the first place attitude. Give God first place in your life. And some of you have prided you. Oh, that's what I did, preacher. I give him first place. Bad news. He ain't never wanted it. Never wanted first place in your life. Let's say you got 5 places in your life you could put things, and you give him 1, and you keep 4. Wow. It sounds like to me you think it's about you and not about him. Oh, why don't you kick everything out of those other 4 places? He says, I want them too. Ruh-roh. Some of you sitting here this morning have prided yourself. Oh, preacher, I give God the preference. Why? I preferred him this morning. I come over here to church. Of course, I feel like, preacher, it's wearing off. I'll not be here tonight. Amen. Wow. Preacher, I don't get out in the night air. Bad news. Scientists have developed now that the day air and the night air are the same. He ain't changed it since creation. Same element since the beginning of time. Wow, that messes up that because it was about you. Well, I tell you, I got a rough week coming up this week. I got to get me some rest. I know, because you think it's about you. He says here, the only way you can demonstrate to the world is that I must have the preeminence. Wow. What is that little word, preeminence? That little word preeminence means that I give God the right to all my choices, all my decisions. He can give, he can take, or he can destroy anything that I have, and I will not open my mouth. I was wondering this morning, does he have the preeminence in your life? You've given it all to him. All your choices, all your decisions, everything you have. He can give it, he can take it, he can destroy it. How come? It's not about me. It's all about him. Powerful principle of demonstration. I see also in verses 20 and 21, there is the powerful principle of death. Paul talks about here, verse 20, and having made peace through the blood of his cross, by him to reconcile all things unto himself. By him I say, whether there be things in earth or things in heaven. You that were sometimes alienated, enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled. He said he hath made peace through the blood of his cross. As I travel across this country, please forgive me, please forgive me. I hear this more from old people than I do young people. And I can say this because I is one. I hear them quite often say, preacher, you don't have to worry about me. I've made my peace with God. Sure enough. Did you know you can't make peace with God? God is the only person that can make peace with you. God declared war on you when you were born. He is the only one that can bring the declaration of peace to your heart. I was interested in that word peace. It is our little word for rest. Rest. Are you demonstrating to the world that you've got rest? Because I'm going to tell you something. All hell's breaking out in this world. Most Baptists I see, they're, my God, what are we going to do? You find very few Baptists today that peace, rest. You remember after Jesus created the world, the Bible said he rested. You remember that? You know, when we rest because we're tired. You don't think he was tired, do you? You know, a lot of times we rest because we're sick. You don't think he was sick, do you? I do believe he was done. The next time John sees him in Revelations, he said he's got a golden girdle around his paps. Jewish men never pull their girdle up on their paps unless they weren't going to do nothing else. They were done. Amen. I love that, don't you? Are you projecting to the world that Hillary can sell it to China and she can split it with Obama? It doesn't matter a flip to me. I read the last chapter. We won. Peace. I was at my little doctor's office not long ago, and the nurse over there, she's the only one to let take my blood because I got deep veins, and I've had some of them poke around in there like they're on an excursion. She hit pay dirt right out of the bank. I love it. I was talking to her. I said, how's your day going? She said, thank God it's Friday. I said, you ever given any ideas to why you like Friday? She said, because it's payday and I'm off tomorrow. I said, it has absolutely nothing to do with it. Son, when I said that, she's sitting right down beside me. She said, well, what does it have to do with? I said, do you remember God created the world in 6 days? And on the seventh day, he rested. Seventh day in Jewish economy was Saturday, the Sabbath. Well, when did he create me? Created me on the 6th day of the week. Created me on Friday afternoon about quitting time. First thing on the agenda, take it easy, Tom. I've done it all. There's nothing left for you to do. Are you and I projecting to the world that we're in a turmoil? Or this thing is over. God has won and conquered everything. Talking about a powerful principle of Christ. I know it's time to go. I know Brother Lawson always gets y'all out of here before 12 o'clock. If you give me another couple of minutes, I'm going to be done. Last of all, the powerful persuasion of Christ. I notice in verse 24, there is the persuasion of personal suffering. Preacher, how can I demonstrate to the world that nothing is about me, it's all about him? The best place for you to do that is while you are suffering. He says in verse 24, who now rejoice in my suffering for you, and fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ in my flesh for his body's sake, which is the church. It seems like, I've read commentaries before, they talk like Christ's suffering did not fill up the cup. And he's going to let you suffer and finish filling up the cup. I don't believe a word of that. I believe he filled up his cup. And he drank it all. and it was the suffering for my justification. But don't worry. He's got a cup for you to fill up. It's called the cup of sanctification. And it shall be through suffering and how you respond to suffering. I remember my daddy. My daddy had cancer. He had open heart surgery. And I would take him to the doctor, and he'd stay back there forever. I said, Daddy, why you stay back there so long for? He says, I'm witnessing to all them people back there. I said, why do you do that for? He said, I don't want to have to come back over here again. You make it quit going to that doctor. You've been giving so much money to him. You tell him about Jesus. God might make you feel better. You'll have to go back over there again. Are you listening to me? Adoniram Judson buried his first wife on the mission field. Hand dug the grave for him and her and his little son. His second wife, Sarah, her husband died on the mission field. Right there in Burma. She had 2 kids. He struck up a conversation with her through mail. He said, Sarah, he said, God has sent you the cup of suffering to your life. He said, Sarah, he said, turn it up and drink it all. I love what Adoniram Johnson said next. He said, Sarah, he said, it's sweet at the bottom. Oh, wow. I don't know what you're going through this morning, but I encourage you to turn that cup up and drink it all, because at the bottom of that cup, you'll find him, and he's the sweetest thing that has ever happened to you. It's not about you. It's all about him. I close with the persuasion of proclamation of Scripture. Paul says in our text in chapter number 1 and verse 23, he says, if you continue in the faith, grounded and settled, be not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you have heard. He tells this little church in Colossae, he says, I've been preaching something to you. He says, I've been preaching something to you. Been preaching something to you. Watch the text. Don't miss this. Look at verse 29. Whereunto I also labored, striving. Paul said, I've been preaching to you. He says, I'm straining every fiber of my being. He says, I want you to see this. He says, I've got to let you see this. He said, I'm straining everything in me. He says, I want you to see this. Paul, pray, tell Paul, what in the world you want us to see? Look at verse 26. Even the mystery which hath been hid from ages, from generations, but now is made manifest to his saints. He says all down through the ages, God has hid this truth. He told nobody. He says, but he told me to come. He said, I'm straining every fiber of my body. He says, I want you to hear this. What is it, Paul? What do you want us to hear? Look at verse 27. To whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is, there it is. What in the world does Paul want us to get, preacher? You know, I'm getting old, and sometimes I forget to tell people what I want to get. I go back to the motel, I say, boy, I wish I'd have told them that. I don't want to forget to tell you this. Paul said, I'll strain every fiber of my gut. He says, I'm preaching to you something that's been a mystery down through the ages. What is it, Paul? That absolutely nothing is about you. It's all about him. He dwells inside of us. I'm asking you this morning. I'm not asking you if you've been down the Romans road, the German road, or the French road. I'm not asking you if you've ever been dunked in a baptismal pool. I'm not asking you this morning if you've ever joined the church. One of the best places for you to go to hell from is the pew of Temple Baptist Church. I'm asking you this morning if you're 100% sure that God Almighty has ever moved inside of you. And you see evidence that He's beginning to project to the people around you by the way you're living, your attitude, your disposition. Nothing's about you. It's all about him. I was thinking again today of old Isaac Watts. Old Isaac Watts, the great songwriter of yesterday, wrote this in the late 1600s. I wonder, do you have anybody like this living inside of you? Watts says, I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the day. The moon shines full at his command, and all the stars obey. You imagine somebody like that living in some lowly creature like me. I sing the goodness of the Lord that filled the earth with food. He formed the creature with his word, then pronounced them good. Lord, how wonders are displayed where'er I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread or gaze upon the sky. Watts said, there's not a plant or a flower below, but makes thy glories known. Clouds arise and tempests blow by order from thy throne, while all that borrows life from thee is ever in thy care. Everywhere that man can be, thou, God, art present there. How is it that God's present everywhere? I know one way he is. Wherever I'm at, it's living inside of me. I want to project to the world. It's not about me. It's all about him. Would you stand this morning? Father, best I know how, I've shared what you told me to share. Lord, I have been a failure so much, letting the world see through my attitude, my disposition, that everything is about you. Nothing is about me. Lord, I don't know how much time I have left upon this earth, but oh, I want the world to see Christ in me, the hope of glory. Put this truth deep in our souls today. We'd be extremely appreciative of it. While our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. I wonder if you're here this morning and you see utter failures in areas of your life where you have thought for a moment or two that life was about you. Maybe God has spoke to you that nothing's about you. Maybe you want to reach out a place in this altar this morning. Ask God to teach you how to give him the preeminence. Oh, that he would live his life in you and through you. And the world would see nothing is about you. It's all about him. Maybe you're here this morning, you've realized for the first time, preacher, God's not living inside of me. There's a vacuum. Oh, I'm religious. I've gone through the religiosities. Preacher, I can't say 100% that God Almighty has moved inside of me. Won't you root you out a place in this altar and ask God to have mercy on your soul? Move inside of you. Take dominion and control of your life. They're going to play a little something on the instruments. We're going to wait a few moments in God's presence. The altar's open. God's speaking to you. Are you, am I, projecting to the world around me? Do they see in me? Nothing is about me. It's all about him. I wonder if you need to come.
You say, preacher, I want that to be. I need a refresher course. I have failed miserably. And even my children, my grandchildren, seeing that it's not about me. It's all about Him. Come, seek Him.